All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So it's week 5, and the 1-3 New York Jets are going to be taking on the Denver Broncos, also 1-3. You guys just got your first win last week, which I know is always exciting. But I feel like with the Denver Broncos right now, it's like, man, personally, I thought this team was going to be looking a little bit better if I'm just being 100% honest. But of course, I'm joined by my buddy Rich. What's going on, man?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. This is like I don't know. I don't even know how many times we've done a collab together, but it's up there. I think it's like number 5 or number 6 or something. But it's always
Yeah,
good
yeah,
bringing
we're
you on.
we're
Go ahead.
yeah, we're getting close to double digits at this point.
I know. I know. Well, dude, I love your insight. You got. I think you have such like a unique take on not only just Denver, your squad, but just other teams around the league, and how offensive line play. I'm always just totally intrigued with what you have to say. But man, what's kind of been your take so far with Denver? You go from like Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson last season. You bring in Sean Payton, the biggest name, at the time the best available coach,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, man, things are going to change. Like potentially seeing something like New Orleans. What's been your instant reaction? Disappointed? Kind of expecting this? What's been your take?
I expected better, but I didn't expect what I think a lot of other fans expected. You can't go from a 5-win team to a 13-win team or a 14-win team one season to the next. The answer is no. It's a no. Um, and and the other thing that so many people, and I think so many fans, I mean, I consider myself like a fan, but I kind of like a fan analyst, kind of the way that I look at things. So I'm certainly a lot more critical, and I'm looking through things from a different lens when I watch, and I take notes during the game. And, again, that's rare, but I do. And so one thing that that a lot of people don't really remember or think about is different coaches have different schemes, and they have different needs for different players in terms of how they want to do things. And when you move offensive schemes, so I will pick on your Jets as well with Nathaniel Hackett. He likes to run outside zone as a run scheme and as a blocking scheme and that sort of thing. That's what they ran in Green Bay, and it's a similar system to what Seattle ran with Pete Carroll there, and kind of what they like to do in that side of things. And you need a certain type of player to run that. You need a guy that's mobile. You typically need a guy that's able to move a guy off the ball in the run game. And you typically become a run heavy or a heavier running team than you do a passing team in that style. And you kind of run to set up the pass. You saw that happen in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. You saw Pete Carroll do that when he had Russell Wilson in Seattle. You did not see that a tremendous amount when Hackett was our head coach in Denver, which is unfortunate. But nonetheless, that is typically how that system likes to work. And you need certain players to fit that scheme. And I found that the Broncos had certain players that fit that scheme well, and certain players that didn't fit that scheme well. And I'm looking at kind of what you guys are doing there now. I think you're going to find yourself in the same boat as we are. Is that you're going to find some of your players are now playing way better, and you're just like, wait a minute, that dude didn't play well under the former guy, but now, okay, well, that's because he fits that type of a scheme. And then a guy that you're like, oh, I think he's getting better, and now you looking in the scheme, now you're like, dude's got to go.
Right.
And that's why.
I gotcha. I think, yeah, with Nathaniel Hackett, I think through the first, I know we talked a little bit about this before, on your show. In that week 1 game, I personally gave Hackett a pass. I know not everybody did. I know you always gotta expect the worst. I personally was not expecting Nathaniel Hackett to have the perfect Zach Wilson game plan in his pocket, ready to pull it out 4 plays into the game. Monday night, all the energy with the theatrics at the stadium and all everything that went into it. Division rival Bills, coming to town, just a massive game. So I will give Hackett a pass in that week 1 matchup, but in weeks 2 and weeks 3, the offense was just pitiful, right? We couldn't throw the ball, we couldn't run the ball, we couldn't run block, couldn't pass protect. The play calling was not anything to even talk about. Quarterback play, non-existent. It was, in fact, a negative, hurting the team, turning the football over. And it honestly seemed like we were playing within a 15-yard box. There was some rule in the playbook or in the game plan, we will not throw the ball beyond 15 yards at the line of scrimmage unless it's a Hail Mary shot at the end of the game. But in week 4, a couple days ago, Sunday night, it looked completely different. And I know
Yeah.
you have some insight on that, and kind of,
Yeah.
and obviously, you're a guy that knows Hackett well. You watch a ton of them, and I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I think you've seen two things, in my opinion, from Hackett. Now, by the way, I have to go back and actually watch the Chiefs game. I didn't get a chance to. My colleague on the Wild Wild West podcast, which airs Wednesdays at least, on the MHRT network. Alex Givens, he's a great dude, fantastic Chiefs fan. If you had him on your show,
He was just on the show last week.
He really is a great guy, and knows his stuff inside out and backwards as well. He's very, very good at what he does. But kind of what he'll tell you is the Chiefs have a certain layout, and so again, when I look at what you guys are doing, I think you're right. I think that Hackett has a certain thing. He wants to have his quarterback sit within the pocket, analyze the field, and surgically pass and run the ball using that type of scheme that he likes running with Rodgers. I think what you saw Hackett try to do with Wilson was to have him become Aaron Rodgers in his best impersonation. But of course, he's not Rodgers, and you found that out very quickly. And I think Hackett learned from some of his mistakes last year with Russell Wilson to not necessarily listen to the quarterback and or quickly change so that he doesn't get caught. And I think you saw that against the Chiefs. So I think you saw him saying, okay, I can't have the guy be Rodgers because he's not Rodgers. We now need to change and pivot and adapt a game plan. The other thing to keep in mind is with a younger quarterback like Wilson or someone who you're trying to develop as a quarterback, quick, fast throws are typically the things that actually get them going. And so it's not necessarily a bad game plan to come out with that as your first, test trial run with a quarterback that you're trying to get into the swing of things. But again, like I said about the offensive line earlier in schemes, if that's not your quarterback's jam, then that's not your quarterback's jam. And you got to change and adapt accordingly. And I think as a Jets fan, you at least got to be happy that he's making those changes quickly and not letting this linger into game 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, 100%. I was talking to my buddy Tyson from Let's Talk Jets Radio, and one thing that we were saying was, thankfully Hackett made these changes in week 4, and it wasn't week 9, week 10, where we're looking at us being 2-8, and it took him, it took us, like the Jets organization, weeks and weeks and weeks to figure it out.
Right,
round peg into a square hole type of thing. It seemed like we quickly pivoted. And I don't know if it's maybe like a learning type of experience from Hackett, because I felt, and look, we did we did we did one preview last year. And I remember that was one of the big things that you were saying about Russell Wilson and Hackett not really meshing well, and that Russell needed to get outside the pocket and he was kind of forced to stay within the pocket. And I remember you actually made a comment about Brett Rippon, the backup, who you might have looked a little bit better specifically for Hackett's system.
Yep.
And, ultimately the season goes on and Russell, we all know how the season went. They fired Hackett. And then I believe whoever took over started getting Russ outside the pocket, and he was making, some nice plays down the field, and the offense was picking up. So it's interesting stuff. And I feel like, although Zach Wilson and Russell Wilson are different players, they both kind of excel in that, once whether it's like a play action bootleg, whether it's just like a speed out, when they get space from the chaos of the trenches, they have an ability to improvise a little bit better. Once they kind of play more free, I feel like everything opens up and it makes sense in their eyes, as opposed to drop back every single play. And look, this is the NFL. Like, you have to do that at some point. It's not like, all right, we can't win games, or we can't operate the offense with our quarterback not being able to throw a pass from the pocket. But the majority of the game, like I know you said you didn't catch the Chiefs game, but it's just a lot of play action. We were pushing the ball down the field, and it kind of goes against the common way of thinking, which is, okay, we have to get Zach in a rhythm. He turns the ball over a lot. He has been inaccurate. He has been erratic. let's keep it short. But for whatever reason, when that's the game plan, it just falls apart. And Zach is, 10 it can't complete the ball, turns it over. It seems like when we're like, okay, let's push it deep, let's get him outside the pocket on these rollouts. He really just looks like a different guy. And, I'm not sitting here saying one game and, Zach is top 10 now or anything like that. It has to be consistent. Another big Zach Wilson flaw is, being able to stack games week after week, good performances after good performances, or even at this point, okay or average performances on top of each other. So hopefully that's what we see against Denver. But what's I'm not watching every Bronco game, but one thing I keep seeing is people talking about the defensive shortcomings. I don't know if it's a personnel thing or if it's Vance Joseph or what. What's been your take on the defense for the Broncos?
I've actually dug pretty deep into the defense now, just because it's so bizarre to me that we saw kind of a downturn at the end of last season, and it not only continued, but it got worse. And to me, that's inexcusable, because some of those sorts of things should have just been fixed. Like, that should have been the thing you coached in the off season. Like, that's why you have training camp, and like that's why the coaches are supposed to coach, right? And so a few really weird things are happening on the defense. Like, for example, we're having misaligned linemen where the offensive line on the opposing team will line to the outside shoulder on a run. And so what they're able to do is they're able to push our D linemen and box them out.
Okay.
And so what you end up with there is when you box the D lineman out, you end up basically, parting the sea of the linemen, and you end up with this like gaping run hole. And you were seeing that against the Dolphins, for example. If you actually analyzed and took a look at that game, the dude was getting to the third level almost right off the hop, and was, basically, playing, running catch up with our safety at the time. And of course, that's a 10-yard run just to start, let alone, where you're going to finish. And so that's a huge issue in terms of gap assignments, keeping the gap integrity, making sure your lanes are where they need to be, and lining up the right way. And it seems like it's a technique issue, actually, of the players, perhaps, rather than a player issue in full. Now, there's still a player issue. Like, we have a deficiency of talent on the defensive side of the ball. We do not have rushing DNs that are actually doing their job and getting to the quarterback. Part of that is also their technique. If they're not lined up in the right spot, they're not going to get there either. But we need to do better kind of across the board. We also have injuries, but every team has injuries. Broncos tend to have a little bit more, it seems, than most other teams, which is a concern. But every team deals with injuries. This is the NFL. That should not be an excuse. You should have depth on your roster. And frankly, if you're going to be honest, as a Broncos fan, that really ought to point towards the front office and the scouting department in terms of bringing the back end of the roster that can be competing for those starting positions, but then also making sure that the backups are at least close to starting caliber on your NFL team, because they're going to need to be needed they will be needed at some point in the season.
Interesting stuff, man. I think Russell Wilson has been better this year. Seems a lot more efficient, especially in like the first half or the first couple of drives. He just seems, like he's really doing a good job of putting the ball in play. And I don't know if that's more a credit to him or Sean Payton, or just a combination of both. But as far as like your assessment of Sean Payton, this is my last question for you too. I appreciate you hopping on and taking the time here. But when you look at Sean Payton and compare him to previous Broncos coaches, Hackett, Vance Joseph, funny enough,
great on good practice.
Yeah. When you look at Sean Payton, he to me is the biggest name. Like, he is like the A-list coach. But it seems like Denver continues to have the same. It just doesn't seem like everything is fully clicking. Again, I know there's more to that than just one side of the football not looking good. But what's kind of your overall assessment of Sean Payton so far?
All right, so you have a new coach, arguably Super Bowl winning coach. No one's arguing that he doesn't know what he's doing. He clearly has a pretty kind of clear vision and how he wants to do things. But yet Denver's seeing similar results as if, we didn't have him here. And to Hackett's credit, who's got to be just smiling at this point, rightfully so, is okay, so if you have Sean Payton here and the Broncos are not doing well, and you had Nathaniel Hackett here and the Broncos were not doing well, is that really a Hackett problem, or is that maybe the front office scouting, culture, et cetera, et cetera? And I think at this point here, you have to basically hold the fixtures in the organization accountable. So not just the players, because the players bear responsibility as well, but you have to hold the fixtures, the folks that kind of stay in their offices that help make these decisions accountable as well. Otherwise, the players are going to say that this is an organization that doesn't hold anyone accountable. So then why should I be held accountable as well? So that's the general manager, the scouting department, any other consultants that they bring in to help, identify and sort things out, and that all of those folks need to be held accountable. And at this point, frankly, you have multiple losing seasons. They really ought to be let go and move on to, getting better people in those seats and in those offices to hopefully become more competitive. On Sean Payton's side, though, I think that's what you're seeing the improvement on offense, is that Sean Payton is a very bright offensive play caller. He designs plays very well. And he also has a very, very good understanding of today's NFL and the rules that benefit offense, which is really what you need to start planning for. For example, heavy tight end sets. So 12 and 13 personnel for those football X's and O's guys out there or gals out there. So that's you're going to see that with Hackett as well, for example, with the Jets, because he is a fan of running those. So 12 personnel would be 2 tight ends, 13 personnel would be 3 tight ends on the field, generally speaking. And Hackett likes to do some of the same things Peyton does, where he'll stack 2 tight ends on either the right or the left-hand side of the line. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm using the football terms to describe them, but that's what you're going to visually see as a fan on the field, is those 2 tight ends stacked on the right or those 2 tight ends stacked on the left. And then when you get into the 13 personnel, you end up with normally 2 on the right and then 1 on the left, or you flip accordingly. And then you end up some of those tight ends will stay in line and block for maybe run plays. And then for those play action pass kind of quasi style plays, you get those shallow crossers where you get the tight end that runs just in between the linebacking core there, or you'll get the seam route where you'll end up with the tight end that'll break right up the seam and then kind of go right up the middle. You saw Gronk do that, for example, if you're looking for a recency bias example that we all remember. That's how Brady and Gronk basically lit the league on fire, was those tight end seam routes right up the middle of the field. So no, I see, actually, funnily enough, I see a tremendous number of similarities in personnel in terms of some of the general formations that you see between Peyton and Hackett. However, the scheme is not the same. The way they run their scheme is not the same, and what they want to do is not the same. Hackett's scheme is a kind of run to pass, whereas Peyton's is a pass to run. Which again, you need different people for that. And I think that's why you're seeing the offense do better, but not well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like the Denver Broncos, outside of this last week, and of course, it's such a small sample size, only 4 games into the year. So I guess in the first 3 games, they kind of reminded me a little bit of how Chip Kelly was with the 49ers and Eagles a little bit, and even Adam Gase with the Jets, where in that first quarter, like the team is clicking, like everything is. Like the play calls are boom, solid. Everybody knows exactly where to be. They're lining up. They're completing passes. They're executing blocks. They're having success in the running game. They're finding their way into the end zone, picking up first downs. Like everything is great. And then once they get that 14 points, once they convert a couple of times, like those 2-3 drives, once those are over, and the other team starts to adjust and make those changes. That's when the issues start to arise. And again, I'm not watching every Bronco game. I'm not exactly, finding, every little detail wrong with what's going wrong. And again, I know a lot of people have been pointing to the defense, but that's just kind of been my takeaway from Denver this year, despite their talent.
I agree. You used an A word in there, adjust. That's exactly it. So what you typically end up with in a game plan is you come up with a script. And again, what a lot of people get wrong is a script isn't First play, we are running this. Second play, we are running this. Third play, we are running this. Some coaches do have something like that. And a lot of those kind of, you can tell which coaches those are, because play number 2 in the game gets absolutely wrecked by the opposing team. And just like, why would you ever run that? And that's just because they literally scripted out play 1, 2, 3, and 4. And play 2 is just the wrong play to run in that situation. The better coaches, and Peyton is absolutely in that category, and frankly, Hackett is kind of does the same thing, is they'll put together 5 or 10 plays. And it'll be, if you see this look, we are running play A or play B. And it is up to the quarterback to either adjust play A or play B, or to run play A or play B. And so that's why in Denver now, you're actually seeing an offense that's doing better. Mm-hmm. Is that they're running the right plays at the right time. And because Peyton has designed the plays, you're getting guys open. You're getting shallow crossers open. Russ is feeling more confident in how those look. And that's a good thing. He's also allowed to break out of the pocket, because Sean Payton has no problem with Russ breaking out of the pocket, not trying to contain someone that is not liking to be contained within the pocket. And that's a good thing. So you're seeing better quarterback play ultimately. And I think Hackett is now starting to adapt and adjust in with the Jets now, where he's allowing Zach Wilson to do those same things. The other thing to look out for, just as a tidbit of insight on the offensive side for Hackett, for the Jets fans that, again, may or may not notice it, Hackett loves layered crossing routes, where he'll have the wide receivers kind of all either bunch and then run cross field at different depths. So he'll have a shallow, a mid, and a deep crosser where they kind of all go at the same time, or he'll stack the receivers on either side and they'll kind of do the same thing where they kind of do this. And he seems to love those crossing routes. And if Wilson could have seen the field better last year, that was Russell Wilson, not Zach Wilson, there would have been a lot more completed passes. Just Wilson really, really struggled seeing and kind of throwing in ahead of those receivers as they're running. Those crossing routes are very good for yards after catch. So Lazard, I think, had a couple of those where he caught the ball in stride and ran. Lazard was very good at those in Green Bay. So I suspect that you're going to see some of those with the Jets as well, because Hackett loves them.
Yeah, hopefully New York, hopefully Denver, we both, as struggling offenses before in the past, hopefully as the weeks go by here, we start picking it up a little bit and getting in the win column. But Rich, I appreciate you taking the time. I do. I again, I always look forward to these conversations, and yeah, every time I see the Jets playing the Broncos in the regular season, I'm like, cool, Rich is coming on.
No, I appreciate it. These are great conversations. For what it's worth, I actually have the Jets beating the Broncos this game. I think ultimately the Jets defense is going to be too much for the Broncos offensive line, which still needs a fair amount of work. I have it as a modestly close game, somewhere in the 3 to 7 point range, kind of depending on how things work out. Could be wrong. Broncos could be kind of on the upswing now, but I think ultimately when you have a good defense and a well-coached team and a team like the Jets that are also improving, I think it'll be a tough slog for the Broncos. And I think that we're going to be kind of brought down to earth, because we barely beat the Bears and they are not a great team.
Awesome, dude. Well, I hope you're right.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But anyways, I appreciate having me on again. My show airs live every Wednesday. It's the entire AFC West, called the Wild Wild West podcast, airs on the MHRT network. And if you guys have any questions about the Broncos, or if you have questions just to kind of about, my insight and Hackett or any of that kind of stuff, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, that's my handle down below. Reach out to me and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, and of course, all of Rich's links are listed down below in the description box as well. So yeah, thanks so much for everybody hanging out, watching, and yeah, as always, go Jets.